A lot of our history comes from Rome. We have to recognize that. It was old Gibbon who said that when the wars are fought, the victors tell the story. I'm not giving his words exactly, but that's the gist of what he says. He says, in other words, it is the victors who tell the story. So if you're a defeated Christian small group, then your story is told from the standpoint of those who conquered you. And Pelikan, the modern American scholar, says, and there is no other way, many times, to tell the story.
Now, as you may know, my running mate, Tim, is Catholic and went to Jesuit schools. And one of the things he and I have talked about is this idea from the Jesuits of the Magus, the more, the better.
That day, His Holiness will be the first Pope in our history to address a joint session of Congress.
And for the first time in world history, the use of corruption and oligarchs as a sinister tool in the conduct of foreign policy.
We're humbled that the Holy Father has accepted our invitation and certainly look forward to receiving his message on behalf of the American people.
Countries emerging from chaos in the midst of war, challenges to the international order on the high seas and in the skies.
The fall of Ramadi has galvanized the Iraqi government. So with the additional steps I ordered last month, we're speeding up training of ISIL forces, including volunteers from Sunni tribes in Anbar province.
And where major powers come together to deal with the challenges of our time that require us all to act in concert. And there are many challenges, including violent extremism.
Hello, everybody on YouTube and around the globe here, or the earth, or whatever you want to call it. This little terra firma where we live on is now a, what should we say, a globalized system that these architects put together, these quote-unquote grand architects. But here we are sitting today on Skype to do another session from the Divine Program of the World's History by Albert Close, a little book that I got on eBay, believe it or not, under the same title as Henry Grattan Guinness's book, which I was looking for, and I found this instead, and I thought this would be great. And sure enough, it is a very interesting little book, and we are gathered here with Daryl Eberhardt and Jörg Glissman, and we are in the second portion. We just started in the last session the Divine Program of European History. So with that, I'll ask Daryl, would you like to say something?
Sure, and it's good to be on with both of you as usual. And just very quickly, but it's something that's on my heart because in my area, we have an epidemic going on. We have a severe epidemic in southwest central Pennsylvania and a good bit of all of Pennsylvania, and that epidemic is called a bunch of pedophile priests. And I just wanted to mention two books. You found the one that I have, can't find my copy of. It's called Lucifer's Lodge, Satanic Ritual Abuse in the Catholic Church. And it was written by a guy named William H. Kennedy. You found it in PDF format, Brett, so that, folks, if you want to take a look at a book, this man died a suspicious death, and you can read into that what you want to. But William H. Kennedy wrote the book, Lucifer's Lodge, Satanic Ritual Abuse in the Catholic Church, where he not only gets into the problem of pedophile priests, and none of them in my area have gone to jail yet, despite over 100 being recognized as pedophile priests, openly protected by the police and many times by some of the folks in the media. Fortunately, we had a couple newspapers that did expose them in Johnstown and Altoona, Pennsylvania. that did expose them. But the thing is, to the best of my knowledge, none of them have been convicted. We've got a couple Franciscans that you're trying to chase down that are in different states that are high-level Franciscan prelates that seem to have knowledge of a lot of some of their folks that were doing evil. And again, everyone's dragging their feet. We have problems with the laws where the statute of limitations runs out, and they drag it out until that's done with, or witnesses die. Sometimes suspicious deaths and that. But this thing is rampant. Again, it's epidemic in my area of Pennsylvania. And it was covered, like I said, by the Johnstown Tribune Democrat, and the Altoona Mirror, fortunately, did cover them. The other book I just wanted to mention, and by the way, William H. Kennedy was a Roman Catholic who had the guts to take on, expose the horrible sexual sins that were going on within the Roman Catholic Church. And then William H. Kennedy also mentioned in his book that as big as the problem with pedophile priests was, this is a good thing that he brought out that you don't often hear about, is that the abuse, he felt, the abuse of women, including nuns, in the Roman Catholic Church was as big or bigger problem than the pedophile priests. Now, you know how big the problem was with pedophile priests. So if that's an even big as or bigger problem, and he thought it might be bigger, no wonder he probably died an early suspicious death. The other book is, and this is a 1,282-page book written by another Roman Catholic. This lady, very courageously, Randy Engel, E-N-G-E-L, she wrote a 1,282-page book called The Rite of Sodomy, and it's not R-I-G-H-T, it's R-I-T-E, The Rite of Sodomy, with a subtitle of Homosexuality and the Roman Catholic Church. You can find pictures of that on the internet, but it's called The Rite of Sodomy, Homosexuality and the Roman Catholic Church by Randy Engel, 1,282-page, and she's evidently not too far from me. Her publishing, New Engel Publishing, is in Export, Pennsylvania. So there are people within the Roman Catholic Church that are trying to expose some of the problems in there. And as we all know, the problem is that, unfortunately, a lot of them don't recognize the problems with doctrine and practices based on tradition within their church. But again, I just wanted to mention those two books because this thing is really epidemic in my area of Pennsylvania. It still hits the papers. I've seen it in those two newspapers, Altoona Mirror and Johnstown Tribune Democrat, fairly frequently, and it just, nothing gets done. And we have Roman Catholic prelates, by the way, including a Monsignor who was attached to one of the previous bishops of the Johnstown Altoona diocese. This Monsignor openly bragged that they own the sheriffs and the police chiefs of the cities, and so he expected nothing was going to happen. Isn't that something? I just wanted to mention that, and thank you for letting me do so. And do you guys have any comments about them bragging about them owning the police chiefs and the sheriffs and that?
Boy. Yeah, I made the mistake here not mentioning Jörg Lissman in Belgium, who is also joined with us. Jörg.
Oh, no problem, no problem. I'm listening to Daryl, and I have something to say what he says, but maybe you want to go
I'm
first.
sure you do. Please, go ahead.
Oh, the only thing I wanted to say is that I lately took it on me in German to start a complete new video series that is called The Systematic Roman Catholic Child Abuse. Right. And I got to that idea because I watched one video from Nicholas from presenceofgodministry.org, the SDR site, who I do not really advise people to go to, because SDR just means Seventh-day Remnant, and he is as Seventh-day Adventist as they go, even though he calls himself a remnant, called out of the church, but he venerates Ellen G. White and all that stuff. But he has a website that is a real treasure, and when you're doing research in this regard. And he put out a video on an article that was released by BuzzFeed of nuns killing children and abusing children. And that set me up to do my own video series in that, but I didn't want to do that in English because my English listeners are so few. I rather want to bring this topic to the Germans, where this also is not very much spoken about. And so I have two brothers in Christ who started translating for me papers from Richard Bennett and papers from Nicholas from presenceofgodministry.org, where I started this reading now, and now I am into this little book from Robert Grassmann, who is a German author who published in 1937 the Moral Theology of Alfonso Liguori, in a 57-page book, and I'm going to read that complete book to lay the foundation, to lay the sure foundation, why abuse, sexual abuse, child abuse, but abuse overall. And Daryl just mentioned it when we are speaking about the abuse of nuns and when we are speaking about the abuse of monks. It is the Roman Catholic Church's root to abuse the children of God. And these children of God may be minor in age, but they also maybe be even adults. It doesn't matter if you are 25, 35, 65, or 15 or 5, you're always a child of God. Child abuse is very often understood only in the term of minors, but you have to understand it in the whole context. It is the abuse of the Babylonian heathen pagan sun-worshipping system of all the children of God. And everyone is a child of God. Maybe not everyone is elected, but everyone is a child of God. And every abuse is damnable, whether it is for a child or for an adult. I mean, I personally do not see what all of a sudden changes in our mind, and where's the little switch that in our mind says, oh, now somebody is 18, now we can go to the army, now we can kill him, now he's not a child anymore. And therefore he is what? Free to kill? What is that pretentious thinking? Where do we get that from? Why is it a difference if someone is 10 or 30? They are both men. They are both a child of God. And in the Roman Catholic Church, it is the root of the Roman Catholic Church, the Babylonian sun-worshipping root, to abuse the children of God. All children of all ages. And when you read through Liguori's Moral Theology, good luck, it's more than 7,000 pages, by the way. He is a quote-unquote doctor in the Roman Catholic Church. That means he is one of the very few select in the Roman Catholic Church whose teaching is being profound in the Roman Catholic Church, especially his moral theology. And when you read in this little book alone what he has to say about the confession box and about how priests are being educated, trained to ask the quote-unquote right questions to virgins, married women, little girls and little boys in the confession box, then your stomach will turn around. And that is what is on the basis of all this abuse. And of course it all goes hand in hand with what Daryl mentioned, this satanic rituals, these satanic rites, R-I-T-E-S, rite, which comes from ritual, which comes from tradition. It is a tradition within the Roman Catholic Church to sacrifice to idols. Because it's an idolatrous church. It is worshipping the sun. It is worshipping the creation and not the creator. Because it is worshipping a created being. It is worshipping whether Lucifer on the one hand or Satan on the other, who is actually one and the same, but Luciferianism is something else than Satanism, but let's not just open this door today. But the point is that Lucifer is a created being. And when you worship anything that he says, he dogmatized, he puts out in front of you, you are worshipping the creation more than the creator who made it. And that's the big point of the Roman Catholic Church. Whether it's in child abuse or it is in complete man abuse. I mean, mankind abuse. or is anybody here in our little round that says, oh, the Roman Catholic Church is not abusing all of mankind? I guess we all are in agreement on that, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
And therefore I started this little series in German, where today I put out a video that is only accessible for people older than 18 years of age, because there's some very explicit sexual language in there, and I explain that sex is a gift from God ordained for marriage. Something the Roman Catholic Church, of course, never teaches like this. That's why, because they have their moral teachers like Busenbaum, who was a Jesuit, like Suarez, who was a Jesuit, like Alfonso Liguori, who was not a Jesuit, but who started his own little congregation called the Redemptorists, and they are very similar to the Jesuits. And in France, actually, when the Jesuits were forbidden, were cast out, people sought refuge, the Jesuits sought refuge with the Redemptorists, because they are almost the same. And this Roman Catholic doctor wrote papers of 7,800 pages, if I'm not mistaken, that every priest who starts his seminary, who starts his education as a Roman Catholic priest, has to take, so that he knows what are the right questions to ask the quote-unquote penant in the confession box. So I don't know how deep this book goes that Daryl just explained to you, but if you do not have that background, if you don't trace the Roman Catholic Church back to its Babylonian roots, you will never come to the basis, to the roots of those rites, R-I-T-E-S, and traditions. Okay? That's just the point that I wanted to make. I just today uploaded that part of that series.
Jörg brought out a good point, and that is about it's not just children. When you read Jasenovich, when you read about Jasenovich, that horrible concentration camp, torture center, mass murder center in Roman Catholic fascist Croatia, where they butchered women, children, elderly. And I wanted to make the point that in World War II, of course, anytime you have a war, you have children dying, you have elderly dying. And a lot of elderly and children died in both of those wars, where the elderly, the very young, and the very old. Let me finish just a second.
Yeah, okay.
What's important to keep in mind is that two of the biggest groups of people that have casualties in wartime are the very elderly and the very young. They don't handle being exposed to like cold weather, to dysentery or anything else, fevers even, but even minor cuts in that can often result in the death of the very young and the very old. And the very old were horribly treated. When you think of the slaughters of the Albigenses, Waldenses, and other peoples, Papal Rome has this terrible, terrible history of mass murder and genocide, and they don't care. Age or sex does not matter to them. They burned many women and even children at the stake during the so-called Holy Inquisition. So I wanted to mention that. And I wanted to ask Jörg, I was stationed in Berlin for 3 years. I seem to remember reading somewhere where they had some problems with a Jesuit school, and for some reason Berlin's sticking in my mind, where they were abusing, I think, boys. Was that Berlin, Germany? Do you remember reading anything about that, Jörg?
No, I don't. I'm sorry.
Okay, but I do remember reading there was a Jesuit school in Germany there, and I think it was in Berlin. But
they have this one castle that is called the Welvenburg, which they used for satanic rituals, surely within the SS in the time, where young people were educated into satanic rites and all that stuff, and satanic rites took place. That is the Welvenburg, but I don't know if that is anywhere close near Berlin. I'm not sure about that. No, sorry, Daryl, I didn't want to interrupt you there a little bit earlier, but when you said something about children are being the first victims of this war, and most of the times of these wars, I couldn't help. Sorry, I had to open this, and I wanted to mention this. This satanic, evil woman that you are looking at, Madeleine Albright. She said in an interview on television that you can look up on YouTube, when asked if 500,000 dead Iraqi children were worth the price to pay for the achievements of the war, she said it was worth it. 500,000 dead Iraqi children. I mean, when you look at this woman, don't you see Satan right looking through her eyes? It's just incredible.
I think wasn't her daddy and mommy, or daddy anyway, a communist or something, but yeah, I remember that interview, and I think I even heard it. Where
I saw it on YouTube, You can Google it on YouTube. Madeleine Albright, 500,000 dead children, I think something like that, you will find it. I can Google it right here.
We've watched it. I've watched it. I know exactly what you're talking about, but I know, Yerk and Terrell, another point I want to make here about this satanic ritual abuse that goes on inside these ritualistic churches. There's a lot more ritualistic churches than just the Roman Church. Unfortunately, the Lutheran Church has been dominated by Jesuitism for a very long time, and it's not apparent at all. And most of the people that I talk to that think they know what Protestantism is are completely clueless, and they think that these rituals are a good thing, and they keep them going. And sadly, I think the Lord will reveal the real truth to us as individuals when we pray for that revelation, and we seek it with all our heart, and we don't let others dominate our understanding. We have to be able to approach the Lord and the Bible. And this is the real problem. We have learning against learning on steroids today. It's on steroids. I mean, it's a schizophrenic thing that's come over the whole Western world, and we're not even allowed to speak about Scripture because nobody knows what it is.
Right. I may have opened a can of worms here, but this isn't very long. There's only 2 paragraphs. This is on the back cover of The Rite of Sodomy, Homosexuality in the Roman Catholic Church by Roman Catholic courageous lady Randy Engel, and it's not very long. I want to read it because you wouldn't believe how much, and I think you guys probably know this from knowing history, how much Francis Cardinal Spellman was honored so much in the United States of America. I mean, like anytime you had a presidential race like JFK and Nixon running against each other, of course they would have the big dinner, and who's there standing between the 2 presidential candidates? Francis Cardinal Spellman, who was known, Vietnam War was nicknamed after him, Spelly's War. But here's what this courageous Roman Catholic lady has to say on the back cover of The Rite of Sodomy, Homosexuality in the Roman Catholic Church. She says, "An open secret is a secret hidden in plain sight. The homosexual lives of William Cardinal O'Connell of Boston and Francis Cardinal Spellman of New York were just such a secret, and remain so even after their deaths. There are at least 2 reasons for this. 1, because they lived in an era when most Americans had no reference point by which they could recognize, discern, and label homosexual behavior in the life of any individual, much less in the lives of 2 Roman Catholic prelates of so great a stature. Secondly, because with few exceptions, O'Connell and Spellman were surrounded by individuals who had no wish to know. The media and the police, for their part, kept their silence. The only group that openly discussed O'Connell's and Spellman's, these two cardinals, sexual exploits with young men in and out of the clergy were their homosexual contemporaries, and they never outed either cardinal while the prelates were alive. Final paragraph, the homosexual legacy of William Cardinal O'Connell and Francis Cardinal Spellman has followed us into the 21st century. We are currently on the third generation, when the book was written, we are currently on the third generation of clerical homosexuals and pederasts who can be directly tied to O'Connell and Spellman and other homosexual prelates, and they mean Roman Catholic prelates, high-ranking clerics of the early 20th century. And there will be many more generations of clerical homosexuals and pederasts to follow unless Rome acts to disinherit their heirs of perversion from the Catholic priesthood and religious life. And that religious life means like convents, monasteries, and that monks and nuns, etc. I thought that's a very interesting thing for her to put on the back of her book. And again, a Roman Catholic lady, Randy Engel, wrote a 1,282-page paperback book that is heavily footnoted and resourced. She did her homework, and this thing it's legion. It is rampant. It is epidemic in the United States of America, and I would suspect many other places in the world where Roman Catholicism holds reign and is dominant. But boy, my area of Pennsylvania, southwest central Pennsylvania, this thing is an epidemic. And again, why don't these people go to jail? And she told John the Back, the police and the media often protect these Roman Catholic prelates. And thank God in my area, the two major newspapers in the two cities in this diocese, the Altoona Johnstown Diocese, Johnstown Tribune Democrat newspaper and the Altoona Mirror newspaper, had the guts to go after these sexual predators within the Roman Catholic Church.
It's not only, Daryl, that they protect them because they are in the same secret societies. The biggest problem is that the temporal power does not have any jurisdiction over the spiritual power.
Right.
I mean, when you go to Kevin Annett, who I'm not very much promoting because Kevin Annett was suggested to receive the World Peace Prize. What is that? This Nobel Prize.
Nobel Peace Prize.
The Nobel Peace Prize. And anyone who is getting that, you know that he is a game player. Yeah. So he is controlled opposition. That's what I say here openly, and I don't care what you think about it, but to me, there is no way around it. When Kevin Annett tried to persecute the Roman Catholic Church for their child abuse in Canada and all over the world, and he went to the World Court, do you know what the World Court said to Kevin Annett? Oh, we are sorry, but we don't have jurisdiction over the Holy See.
That's what I was just about to say. No jurisdiction.
Yep,
people
that's
don't
right.
understand. They have diplomatic immunity.
They are the supervisor of the United Nations. They have a status of what is that called? A permanent observer status.
Yep.
That was manifested in 2005, if I'm not mistaken, by President George W. Bush with an executive, how do you call that? Executive order, or how do you call that in America?
Executive order.
Executive order. Yeah, with an executive order of what you can read in the book The Global Vatican on page 216, if I'm not mistaken. You can read it there for yourself. Francis Rooney, Knight of Malta, who then was the ambassador of the United States to the quote-unquote Holy See, he wrote about that in his book, The Global Vatican. the observer status of the Roman Catholic of the Vatican. That's why the Vatican is no player in the United Nations. That's why the Roman Catholic Church is no player in the World Council of Churches. But these organizations, the United Nations and the World Council of Churches, were made for the Vatican, so that all the members of these organizations could come crawling under the wings of the Vatican on the one side and on the Roman Catholic Church on the other side. Because that bird has two wings, a temporal and a spiritual wing. The temporal wing is the United Nations, and the spiritual wing is the World Council of Churches. Oh, Darren, you surely opened a can of worms with this subject, you know.
And when I think of Thomas Richards and his website, spirituallysmart.com, you could see all kinds of pictures of these prelates being surrounded by presidents of the United States, from Bill Clinton to George Herbert Walker Bush to Baby Bush. And that, I mean, like when you have a ribbon cutting ceremony in New York City or wherever, in a big city in the United States or something, you're going to have generally an archbishop or a cardinal, shortly at the minimum several bishops, and that, along with the city mayors of the biggest cities like New York, or governors of the state, big governors like New York, in the state of New York, state of California, that you're going to find that you're going to have the biggest, most powerful political folks alongside very high-level Roman Catholic prelates, all working together, arm in arm, hand in hand. And we could probably get some other descriptions, but I think people will get the point that you're going to find at these different ceremonies and that. And no wonder then we find magazines like Time and these big magazines in the United States, when they decide to have the Man of the Year or something, why often we find the picture of a pope on it. They control the media. That is for sure. They really control the media. But like I said, this problem is epidemic. It's rampant in this area, but it's rampant throughout many of the large cities in the United States of America.
Oh yeah,
and
you hit the nail on the head, Daryl. Yeah, you just slammed it. Minneapolis, St. Paul, the sodomite cities here, is full of them. Just brimming full of them. And yeah, I had no idea how bad this is until you do an internet search. And then you see the full impact of it. But you have to specifically search the terms, because all the media is there doing its job, covering up all of it to the best of their ability. And there are things that come out because they have to come out. But as far as the ecclesiastical power, you don't ever hear about that except for here. That's our job. We're going to expose the ecclesiastical power of this United States, because this sucker's riding the beast. And if you don't consider the United States being the Fourth Reich, I'm sorry. There is nothing I can do for you. But that's what it is. After Operation Paperclip, after World War II, after the OSS, Yerk just sent me a wonderful paper that I haven't had enough time to read.
I just wanted to say, did you receive that?
CIA.
Yeah. I got it too.
And, oh yeah, I think this is a bottomless pit. It really is. This is the bottomless pit, and it's been subjected to the United States, and of course, the United States is a very worthy place for it, because it's just brimming with prosperity here. And, do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. And that's what we're living in. It is a satanic sewer, I want to say, of do as thou wilt. And everything is legal here. Everything's legalized. And, it's not legalized to expose the Catholic Church, though, for what it really is. You can't talk about the synagogue of Satan being the Roman Catholic Church, because they don't call it a Roman Catholic Church in the United States. They call it a Catholic Church. And then, oh, well, that's the Catholic faith. And don't you know, all churches are joined ecumenically into the Catholic faith, and we're all the priesthood of believers now. What a mess.
Yeah. I just was in one of my little documents here on my word processing, and Lucifer's Lodge, by the way, that book, Satanic Ritual Abuse in the Catholic Church, of course, it's awfully hard to find. It was a paperback, 220-page paperback book that was published, and of course, it went out of print, I believe, and what happened was that you can still probably find a few used paper copies of it, but the main thing is that Brett did find it on PDF, and so I just want to read very briefly the little write-up I wrote about Lucifer's Lodge, Satanic Ritual Abuse in the Roman Catholic Church by Roman Catholic author William H. Kennedy, who died a suspicious death. Here's what I wrote. This book not only exposes the massive problem of Roman Catholic priests preying upon boys and young men within the Roman Catholic Church, but it also deals with the tremendous amount of religious, in other words, for example, priests, but also other nuns, abuse of girls and women, including other nuns within the Roman Catholic Church. Author William H. Kennedy, a Roman Catholic, met with an untimely death, as did a number of other individuals who were exposing sexual abuse, especially by priests, within the Roman Catholic Church. This book was recently available on the internet in PDF format. Important. This book, again, was written by a Roman Catholic who died a suspicious, premature death because he was told to back off, and he didn't back off. And he did get that book out, and it's a tremendous book. I still haven't been able to dig mine out. I had it somewhere here, but at least it's available in PDF format. And if I would urge it, 220 pages, go up and read that book. It's an easy read, won't take you very long to read it, and you will be surprised at what you find in that book.
It's quite preeminent that when you are a Roman Catholic in the United States of America and bear the name of Kennedy, that you die a premature death, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot of them. Yeah, Bobby and John, both, whatever their problems with immorality, etc. are, I'll say one thing for both of them. They had the courage, the guts to go up against the strongest coalition of power in the world, and that is they went up in the United States, they went up against the Roman Catholic hierarchy, which was headed at that time by a man named Francis Cardinal Spellman, but the mafia was tied in, and so whenever Spellman certainly is put at near the center of those planning or coordinating, as I say, orchestrating and choreographing the execution in broad daylight in the United States of America of a sitting president called John Fitzgerald Kennedy, who had his head nearly blown off. The brains blew out the back of his head. Brain matter splattered on the windshields of the two motorcycle policemen.
You cannot say that, Daryl. You cannot say that. He was shot by one rifle in the back of his head. How can then the brain come out of the back of his head when he was shot in the back? Oh, you are talking conspiracy theory, you know.
Yeah,
it was one lost bullet, you know.
But when you find brains and blood matter and that all over the windshields of the cops that are trailing the vehicle, then you know that the kill shot did not come from the book depository. And a number of good people have written good books explaining that, including a guy who was a Marine sniper named Craig Roberts, wrote a book about that. So that was one of the greatest cover-ups in the history of America, was what I call the Warren Whitewash Commission that was allegedly headed the Supreme Court Judge Warren, but it was really headed and run by a guy named Allen Dulles, who had been fired by JFK, who was the head of the CIA, who was a Knight of Malta, as we find many of the people in and around the cover-up of the JFK assassination.
Making the fox the guard of the hen house, eh?
Yeah, exactly. But the Warren Commission is just interesting by itself, because there you have two Knights of Malta. You have one named James Jesus Angleton, who is a Knight of Malta.
Whenever in America you have a commission, you have to be very careful. You know, you remember the 9/11 Commission?
Yeah.
they didn't even mention Building 7 in there. What is it called? I think it is called officially the 9/11 Omission Report, right?
Yeah, the Omission Report. That's right.
But let me finish the point on these two guys that are made to be the liaison to the Warren Whitewash Commission. You have an FBI guy named Cartha Deek DeLoach, who's a Knight of Malta. Cartha Deek DeLoach is controlling all the material going up and down between the Warren Whitewash Commission and the FBI. And then you have a guy named James Jesus Angleton, who is a Knight of Malta, and he's the CIA liaison, controlling all the information going up and down between the Warren Whitewash Commission and the CIA. So anytime they have a kind of an investigative committee or commission or anything, and they put their people in the key choke points, well, guess what? They control all the information that gets seen and does not get seen by anyone that's doing an investigation. So you rarely have an impartial investigation of anything. But it wasn't just that they killed John Kennedy and murdered him in broad daylight, executed a sitting U.S. president in broad daylight, but they then performed choreographed and orchestrated one of the greatest cover-ups in the history of the world, not just the history of the United States, where they claim a magic bullet flying through the air from behind kills Kennedy, and yet his brains, as we mentioned, and I don't mean to be gross, but his brain matter and stuff and blood is spattered all over the windshields of the two motorcycle police officers that are trailing the presidential limousine. So that's a real miraculous bullet. No wonder they called it the magic bullet, that you can shoot somebody in the back of the head, and his brain matter flies out the same side that the bullet allegedly comes in, which we know it didn't. The bullet came from the front. It did not come from the back. That was the kill shot.
Have you ever heard of a work that is called Reverse Engineering of JFK Assassination Plan, featuring the Killer Queen, speaking of Jackie Kennedy, and how his wife shot him?
That was promoted by at least one guy on the YouTube.
Yeah, me, for example.
Well, no, Alan Lamont was Alan Lamont, but...
yeah, I got it from him, yeah.
Yeah.
In the time. 123
But again,
pages.
it was a massive cover-up. It was a massive cover-up, and it was orchestrated by several Jesuit-controlled Knights of Malta, two of them, one being in the FBI and one being in the CIA, that control all the information going up and down. So again, to murder somebody or to do the cover-up, you don't have to control everybody. You just control the key, what we call choke points, information choke points. So, yeah, we did open several cans of worms there. But, I mean, this subject, it's an important subject, and we're letting people know that there are some books out there, as already mentioned, Lucifer's Lodge and that, and this book by the courageous lady, Randy Engel, and I'm looking right at it. It's a really thick book, 1,200 and some pages, The Rite of Sodomy, Homosexuality, and the Roman Catholic Church. The lady did her homework. She really, and people risk their lives when they do something like that. it's a wonder she didn't survive. I mean, that they didn't put a car bomb in her, so that when she turned on her ignition, that they're famous for doing this in Italy. When you find a courageous prosecutor or a courageous judge or anybody in the judicial system or police system in Italy that goes after some of the top, it's not just after top mafia people, it's after top Roman Catholic prelates. And that, of course, we had another famous murder and cover-up, and that was of John Paul I. John Paul I was clearly murdered, and there's a book out by David Yallop. I'm looking right at it. In God's name, John Paul I was murdered. The subtitle, the book's title is In God's Name. The subtitle is An Investigation into the Murder of Pope John Paul I. Over 6 million copies got sold of that book. And that, some of the earlier editions, but it's called In God's Name, and they've got lots of photos in there of police investigators, judges, and that black and white photos of these guys in cars that were blown up when they turned their ignition on. A favorite way of executing people, not only by the mafia, but people in the CIA and that too, black ops. We need to remember that they've got a lot of blood on their hands. They got an awful lot of blood on their hands, and I'm just going through one of my working aids, just looking to see if there's any more good books out there. But there are a lot of good books that have been written about the problem of clerical sexual abuse within the Roman Catholic Church. And
that's a big problem, too, because a lot of Americans claim ownership of the CIA. Oh, yeah, that's our CIA. Do you know what you're talking about there, buddy? I have some people that I know here that clearly don't understand what the CIA really is, because on its face, it just seems like a good old buddy, organization that's there to protect America. Yeah, well,
that's the
wow.
That's what we call
what a can of worms this is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's called a cover in the intelligence community. You put a cover, like you have a front. Let's say you have a newspaper organization, and you end up using that to put out all kinds of stories to discredit or smear anybody that's approaching the truth or getting ready to expose the truth. And the CIA has been famous for operating a lot of fronts, just like the Jesuits operate a lot of fronts. And I've mentioned this before, but it bears repeating. In that Jesuit-controlled front group called the Knights of the Golden Circle. Its headquarters was in Cincinnati, but it had other castles set up sort of like a Freemason thing, but it was run. It smells exactly like a Jesuit. Well, it was a Jesuit front group, but it smells so much like a front group that is made to look like one thing, but it's really controlled by the Jesuits.
Oh, isn't that true? And they use these signs all over the place, these little Freemason signs when you enter a city on the road. So people think, oh yeah, no problem. Yep. They're just another harmless organization who does charity work, and yeah, they might be a secret society, but, those things aren't a problem. It's just fine. Yeah, right.
Well, since we mentioned what happens, problems with confessional and Liguori and his Latin the Latin that he put out on questions to ask, we might as well mention that there's a great book out there, and you guys know what it is, and Yurik's mentioned it before. It's The Priest, the Woman, and the Confessional by one of the godliest men that ever walked the North American continent. His name was Charles Chinnicky, and it's a 144-page paperback book, a very easy read, 144 pages, and it's called The Priest, the Woman, and the Confessional. And again, this Well, I'll just give you the brief little summary of the book that's in the Chick Publications, because they can get it through Chick Publications at chick.com or but anyway, here's what they say. Chinnicky, a priest himself, was appalled at how many priests used the confessional to abuse women. He warns, keep your wives and daughters away, and he means it from the Roman Catholic confessional. Let me repeat that last sentence. Charles Chinnicky, a priest himself, was appalled at how many priests used the confessional to abuse women. He warns, keep your wives and daughters away from this dirty Roman Catholic confessional. I used to tell some of my Roman Catholic friends, and I have many of them, I grew up in an area where 75 to 80% Roman Catholic just in my little dinky town, but in other towns that are like 4 to 8 miles in either direction, or if you go 4 different directions from my little dinky town, you get into towns that are 90% or more Roman Catholic. And don't think we haven't had open secret. Well, it's not really a secret if it's open, but it was very, very open that a number of these priests were not just abusing boys sometimes, but were abusing women too in the confessional and seducing guys' wives. So just something that people need to think about. And again, I used to ask my Catholic friends, I'd say, how can you let your wife or your daughter go confess her deepest secrets to a man, a celibate man? I mean, like, you talk about playing with fire. You're playing with fire. But again, the name of the book is The Priest, the Woman, and the Confessional, and you can get that through Chick Publications, chick.com. We did open a can of worms, a couple cans of worms, didn't we?
Yeah, that's all right. I think the people, are ready to hear it, because you don't get truth at a inexpensive cost. That is, in terms of your own understanding. The truth opposes a lot of falsehood that's been built up in our minds for decades, or if not an entire lifetime. And when that comes crashing down, it doesn't feel all that good, and people around you will distance themselves from you, and you will be isolated, and people will start looking at you strange. And
you're not going to go ahead.
Speaking behind your back too. It's no fun, but that's the reality of it. And I kind of was going through that with my family for a while, but I think by now they're used to it.
And you're not going to get solid, all the truth type that you're hearing right now. You're not going to get that from Time magazine. You're not going to get that from Newsweek magazine. You're not going to get that, because they throw a few facts in, but you get a very skewed, twisted geopolitical viewpoint, etc., from them. That because they're totally controlled by Jesuit-controlled papal Rome, and often through many of the Jesuit-controlled Knights of Malta. And these Jesuit-controlled Knights of Malta control not only almost all of the mainstream media, but they control a lot of the biggest sports, a lot of your big owners of sports in the United States of America are Knights of Malta. But you also got a lot of Knights of Malta all over the place in the international banking finance community, and they're all over the map in the international intelligence community. So they're controlling all the major levers of power and the levers of the press. So you think of the power that these people have. Do you think it's nothing for them to spend a couple $1 million to orchestrate the murder and cover up of a sitting U.S. president? And by the way, Kennedy wasn't the only president that has been murdered by these people. But that's probably one of the best examples, the murder of John Fitzgerald Kennedy and also the murder of Abraham Lincoln. Massive amount of papal involvement, so much so that the U.S. cut off diplomatic relations with the Holy See because almost every single conspirator, by the way, and a lot of people don't know this, that there was a 12-man military commission that tried 8 of the conspirators in the assassination of Abraham Lincoln and hung 4 of them, including a woman named Mary Surratt, whose little boy, her son, who was very, very educated through the Roman Catholic system, John Harrison Surratt was the object of the greatest manhunt up to that time in U.S. history. That didn't make it into any of the Bill O'Reilly's books. You know, he had a book about killing Kennedy, and I guess he just missed that. You know, just a small oversight on his part. But again, these people write these books about many of the books. Now, there are some really good books about the assassination of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, but there's also books that were put out there that were deliberately designed to get you looking down the wrong rabbit hole. And that's a thing that you've always got to be leery of or wary of when you're doing any investigation of your own. Realize that you be searching for the good investigative people who are trying to get at the truth, but watch out for the people that are doing aiding and abetting, I call it, aiding and abetting the cover-up by putting out false information. And there are about 3 or 4 people, this Michael Collins Piper, there was, I'm trying to think of some of the other ones that were involved in the cover-up of the true facts around the execution of a sitting president, again, in broad daylight, and then the cover-up of it, which is, again, one of the most extensive, massive cover-ups in the history of world assassination, was the cover-up, especially of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. But, yeah, those are entire broadcasts in and of themselves. The murder of Lincoln was horrible. That Charles Chinnicky, he wrote the book, The Priest, the Woman, and Confessional, also wrote 50 Years in the Church of Rome. That's also available through Chick Publications. He recorded, not literally recording as we think of recording today, like we're recording a YouTube session, but he wrote down his conversations with Lincoln, and he continued to meet with Lincoln in the White House after Lincoln was elected. Lincoln got Charles Chinnicky, was falsely accused of sexually abusing a woman who happened to be the sister of a Roman Catholic priest who put her up to it by offering her land to bear false witness, false testimony against Chinnicky. And the Jesuits were licking their lips and happy as could be because they thought they're going to put this Chinnicky guy away because Chinnicky was making problems. He was exposing a lot of the, not only abuse in the confessional, but a lot of the alcoholic abuse within the Roman Catholic priesthood. He was told to back off. He didn't back off, and they went after him, and they falsely accused him of committing a sexual crime, rape, that he didn't do. And Lincoln successfully defended Charles Chinnicky in court, and Chinnicky cried whenever he was acquitted. And Lincoln comes running up and goes, "What's wrong, Mr. Chinnicky? You've been acquitted." And he says, "Mr. Lincoln, didn't you see those Jesuit priests that were sitting in the gallery there, or watching the trial? Didn't you see them looking at you with such hatred? The Jesuits never forgive and never forget, Mr. President. They will come after you. They will try to kill you." And Chinnicky was crying, and Lincoln couldn't understand it. And then later on, Lincoln, some of the conversations that were recorded, Lincoln said, "Hey, these guys are already plotting to kill me. They've made an attempt in Baltimore when he went through Baltimore." Again, These people, they're not just mass murderers. They're assassins of individuals. They've killed so many kings and princes. They tried to kill Queen Elizabeth a number of times. Those plots were foiled. Thank God, the sending of the Spanish Armada. We could go on and on. It's just every 30 to 50 years, these people go on a mass murder spree, but they've been known throughout history of anybody, a monarch, it doesn't matter. You're a queen, a king, or whatever. If you run afoul, you're not playing ball with the Pope and his Jesuit order. Since they came into being in the last 4.5 centuries, then they're going to go after you, and they're going to try to kill you, and many times they succeed in killing you. I could give you a list that's longer than thicker than a Philadelphia telephone book of people that they have assassinated, kings and queens and presidents, and that. Pablo Juarez in Mexico, they poisoned him to death. A couple of the Russian czars they poisoned or killed, or tried to. They did kill the one with a bomb that was thrown at them. It's almost endless, and it's not that we're trying to be. We're not hateful towards individual Roman Catholics, but we're going after the hierarchical, the system, religious system that is also not just a religious system. The religion serves in general as a front. It's a moneymaker, but it's a geopolitical, financial system that has unprecedented power. Greater power. It's the greatest intelligence gathering system in the world. I spent 26 years in the U.S. intelligence community. We've had U.S. presidents. One of the Bushes, I think George Herbert Walker Bush, said that the CIA's great intelligence gathering, but they're nothing compared to the Roman Catholic Church. You think about that for a second. As great of an intelligence gathering machine as the Central Intelligence Agency is, with its many Knights of Malta that have headed that Central Intelligence Agency up, but they just through the confessional, through the local parish priest, anything of interest gets forwarded up to his Monsignor or a bishop, and that gets forwarded up to a cardinal, and then to the Black Pope himself. And not that but many of the white popes are just titular heads, but that it's the greatest intelligence gathering system in the world. And Papal Rome today is the greatest geopolitical / diplomatic / financial power that the world has ever seen. There's nothing that really rivals that papal, again, intelligence gathering, financial, geopolitical machine. And if individual Roman Catholics are honest with themselves and do even a cursory study of history, they're going to find out that there were a number of Roman Catholic historians, like Lord Acton, the British historian, Roman Catholic historian, Peter de Rosa, Roman Catholic English historian, and I believe, and they expose a lot of the machinations and the evil deeds, which are legion, which are epidemic throughout the Roman Catholic Church, throughout its history. And so, again, we're just pointing out true history. And if again, an individual Roman Catholic is honest and takes a look even through the eyes of a Roman Catholic historian, like a couple I just named, Lord Acton, Peter de Rosa, they're going to find out that your own historians have pointed out that the bloodletting by the Roman Catholic Inquisition, its crusades, has no precedence. Even among the most worst barbarians around the world, you find nothing that even rivals the Inquisition, the horrible tortures that they had. I would urge you to watch a video. It's called The Inquisition, or the Roman Inquisition, or the Catholic Inquisition. But if you type it in, The Inquisition, Richard Bennett video into your search engine, YouTube, you need to watch that. It's a 58-minute color DVD where they show the actual torture instruments that were used by the Inquisition, that were approved by Pope after Pope after Pope after Pope in a row, approved all of these horrible tortures that were used. but it not only gets into that, but it gets into the brutal Albigensian Crusades, where they turned professional soldiers on peasants and farmers in France, in southern France. But it also gets into the Croatian Holocaust that was written about by Edmund Paris and by Avro Manhattan, where heavily documented, where they butchered from, at the minimum, 700,000 to 1 million innocent Serb Orthodox Christians, men, women, elderly, and children, gouging eyes out, crucifying priests to wooden doors. We need to know this history. Monica Farrell wrote a book called Ravening Wolves. A number of people have documented this. Edmund Paris, really he was born Roman Catholic. He's a French author. Edmund Paris, and Yerk has read his book, The Secret History of the Jesuits. That can be had from Chick Publications, chick.com. The Secret History of the Jesuits tells you, he lays out a case like a lawyer does, of overwhelming evidence that papal Rome, rather than trying to prevent, as we're told by their PR, their public relations, the propaganda that they put out, that, the Pope tried to prevent World War I. No, they fomented it. And it's very clear from the diplomatic exchanges. J.A. Kensett wrote his, what was that book? Rome's Response, the Great War, Rome Behind the Great War.
Rome Behind the Great War. That's right, Daryl.
Yeah, he documents that the diplomatic exchanges and that. The Pope wanted to use the act, what would later in World War II they call them the Axis, but the Central Powers in World War I, he wanted to use them to go after and chastise Serbia. So he wanted to use the Austria-Hungarian Empire to stomp Serbia, Orthodox Christian Serbia. And then World War II, the poor Serbs ended up getting on the short end of the shaft, as they say, in that war, because they, again, 700,000 to up to maybe possibly 1 million. I know there were a few Jews and Gypsies amongst that, but the vast majority were Serb Orthodox Christians that were, again, murdered, men, women, elderly, and children, by a Roman Catholic actionist group. It was a paramilitary group. It was a terrorist group before World War II, earlier in the century, called the Ustashi. And they were the ones that carried out these horrible things. Yerk sent me that video on Jasenovac, that horrible camp there. And Yerk said he can tell you it's hard to watch. It's amazing that most of these murders that were done during this Croatian, the Vatican's Holocaust in Roman Catholic fascist Croatia in World War II, one of the greatest inch per soil, year per year, mass murders, genocide that the world has ever, most vicious, one of the most vicious genocides that was choreographed and orchestrated by two Roman Catholic prelates, two Jesuit monsignors that were in archbishop positions in Sarajevo and Zagreb. These two archbishops, Jesuits, orchestrated and choreographed this horrible genocide that, again, took up to 1 million people's lives, tortured people horrendously, made necklaces out of eyeballs, buried people alive, skinned people alive, burned people alive, crucified priests to wooden doors, and led often by Franciscan priests and monks. So the church participated, as Richard Bennett and Michael D. Semien, who co-host that video on the Inquisition video, you can watch it on YouTube, 58 minutes color. It's well done. If you can find a good, clean copy of it, it's a well-produced video that, again, shows you all about this Holocaust that happened in Roman Catholic Croatia, not in the 13th century, not in the 14th, 15th, 16th centuries. That thing happened in the 20th century. some of us were born shortly after that. So it's not something in the deep, deep, deep past. And there's been other things since then. The horrible bloodletting that happened in Rwanda and other places. Every time that I turn a stone looking into genocide, mass murder, torture, why is it that I find the Jesuits behind it? Yes, it's true. They have a great reputation for being educators. I should say, I don't know if reputation's the right word, but they're infamous for what they've done in the confessional. But again, read that book, The Priest, The Woman in the Confessional. Not a very big book, but a very important book to read, and it's only 144 pages, paperback book by Charles Chinnicky, one of the godliest men that ever walked the North American continent. And they tried to kill him, by the way, a bunch of times, and failed on their assassination attempts. They tried to stone him, they fired bullets at him, and Chinnicky came through all of those, and God preserved him. And he came out with some great books, including 50 Years in the Catholic Church and The Priest, the Woman, and the Confessional. I highly recommend that you read those books. Well, I took up a lot of time, guys, on the subjects, but I think they're important subjects.
Oh, most certainly.
We still have Jörg with us?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. But I think Jörg and Brett would both second those books that I've mentioned, that they're important books that we need to know that type of history.
Yeah, it's so incredible how the system of this system works. I mean, it's like clockwork, and it's been perfected for a very, very, very long time. And it's so bad that, I mean, it's catastrophic what's happening. I just can't believe it, but it just keeps happening. And the Lord must be incredibly patient, you know?
Maybe we could call this session History of Murder and Assassination and Sexual Abuse. How's that? A history of murder, assassination, and sexual abuse.
It's a huge can of worms.
And that's what it is. That's what it is when you read the true history.
It's the synagogue of Satan.
Yeah. Yep, it really is.
It really
Lucifer's Lodge, as William H. Kennedy, the Roman Catholic writer, said in his book. It's Lucifer's Lodge.
I just can't believe it. I was working for a client yesterday, as a matter of fact, and I was driving down the street to lunch, and here's this sign. Actually, I was driving home last night, and here's this sign in front of a Holiday gas station in the United States here, on the very corner of a very busy intersection. And it has all these little circles with their insignias, like the Lions Club and the firemen, and then of course the Freemasons, and they're all little circles, and they're illuminated, and they're right by this public sidewalk. And I sat there staring at that thing, going, they're just not afraid at all. They're going to show you right out in the open that, we're here and we're not afraid. And, we are in your neighborhood.
Yep.
And, we're watching you.
we see those symbols. You drive into almost any, even small town in the United States of America. I don't care, they're Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York. You're going to see, even on a small town, these different symbols under the sign welcoming you to the town, that all of these different organizations are here. We're here to help you and indoctrinate you and whatever.
That's
but
right.
The thing is you know what? These, again, I mentioned some of these authors risked their lives. Some of these authors gave their lives. Some of them survived assassination attempts. We honor their memory. Some of them are still alive. But we honor their memory by buying and reading their books. And if it's not overly expensive, I would tell people, get the 2 books there by Charles Chinnicky for sure, The Priest, the Woman, and the Confessional, and his other book, 50 Years in the Church of Rome. I know it's a little thicker, it's a little bit more, going to take a little more time, but if you're interested in true history, it's well worth it. And then get this, go up and read the PDF, 220 pages of William H. Kennedy's book, Lucifer's Lodge, Satanic Ritual Abuse in the Catholic Church, because you need to know, if you have any Catholic relatives or anything, or friends, you need to warn them that watch, as Charles Chinnicky says, keep your women folk away from the confessional, but you need to warn them about the massive epidemic predatory nature of this Roman Catholic priesthood that preys upon not only young men and boys, but also preys heavily upon women. And again, William H. Kennedy thought, as big as the pedophile priest problem was in the United States, he felt that the abuse of women and girls was even bigger. So again, he met a premature death. Lucifer's Lodge, Satanic Ritual Abuse in the Catholic Church. I would check it out on PDF. It's not going to cost you a penny. Read it while it's available. Who knows how long there's coming a time soon that they're going to shut down all of this. So beware of it. The time to read things is now, while you can. So take advantage of the YouTube channels that are up there, like Jörg Glissman, Tom Friess, Brett Norman. Take advantage of watching the videos while you can, and take advantage of reading the books while you can, because more and more of them are disappearing. I don't know how many books, and Brett knows, I've told him many times, I can hardly wade through my house now because I'm taking a lot of my books out of the crate, finding a lot of my old books. But some of those books, you can't find them in a paperback book form anymore unless you can find a used copy, and there's very few of them. Sometimes you'll go up and do a search on the internet, and it'll say, 1 used copy available or something. And I think I saw that. Yeah,
that's right, Daryl. And you know, this book that you mentioned, Ritual Abuse in the Catholic Church, that book you can get for $500 if you have a spare $500 lying around, or you can get a free PDF on archive.org, because I found it there. And I can provide a link in the description box of this video. And I think we need to close the session up because it's getting really long now.
Sounds good to me. And again,
but I love what you said there, Daryl, is, it's really, really important to do your own research and to search things out. And, of course, read your Bible and study the scriptures. Right. Know that the 1611 authorized version of the Bible is the only true word of God in the English spoken language, but also you have to realize that this biblical knowledge is being fulfilled. These prophecies are being fulfilled as we speak, and we're still in the flesh. We're not living in Christ's kingdom yet, his eternal kingdom. And there is coming a time where it's going to get really nasty. And that's what we're concerned about. That's why we're doing these sessions now on this ritual abuse subject matter, along with everything else, because it all ties together. It all works together. Romanism is a system of usurpation that is ancient. It's old. It's super old, and it goes back through every successive empire, really, that's ever existed. And this whole idea that we're living on a ancient earth that's millions and millions of years old. Yeah, right. Well, show me the history. Let's see the recorded history, buddy. That's the real fact of the matter is, once you learn about these very, very important books, like Jörg Glissman has read this Rulers of Evil is a fantastic book also to start with if you're very unfamiliar, with anything.
F. Tupper Saucy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, F. Tupper Saucy's Rulers of Evil, and that's also a free PDF on the internet. Yeah. You can't hardly find that book for under $150 right now. So that's very important to keep in mind. Then also, Tom Friess did this reading of the Global Vatican that Jörg was mentioning earlier, and that is one incredible study that Tom was doing during the 2015 year, right before Pope Francis was to arrive and give his speech to a joint session of Congress, which I find very incredible what Pope Francis actually said. And, it says quite a bit about what's happening in this day and age and what we're being allowed to hear and what these high, the Pope is really the highest chair in the hierarchy of the whole known world. And of course, the Black Pope is even higher. The Jesuit general is even higher. And who knows of him, Hardly anyone, dare I say. But boy, Lucifer is only mentioned once in the Bible, right? Just once. And that's why we should all read that entire book of Isaiah and get the idea of what the bigger picture is on this, because it's pretty major. It's not minor. It's very major, and history is repeating itself, and that's what we're trying to get through these thick skulls in our families, that, you got to start looking at the bigger picture. Don't just go to your church and expect they're going to tell you the truth, because they don't. I'll put my word on it. They do not tell you the entire truth. They will not. They cannot. They're under an influence that they don't even recognize. That's why you got to get out of there. Birds of the feather fly together, or they congregate, and if you're going to be a part of a congregation, you're going to fall right into that mindset that everyone else is in, and they'll keep tabs on you. And when you separate from that, then that's when all of the, this stinky stuff hits the fan. I don't want to say the word, but you know what I mean. It gets really nasty, and it smells really bad, and everyone starts thinking that, you're against the congregation. And yeah, that's what the Lord wants, doesn't he? He wants us to be against the wrong congregation.
Right. I'd like to close for me by just reading, and I'm sure then Jörg's going to have some closing comments, but I want to read Revelation 18:4. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues." God's going to punish this wicked system. Write it down. It's guaranteed. You don't want to be partakers of the punishment that's coming on her. So, again, thank you for having me on, letting me participate. I think we got a lot of good information put out, and we got some good books recommended.
Beautiful. Jörg.
Yeah, I'm not going into everything that Daryl just said or you said, because there's so much to say, but just a little explanation on what Daryl just said with the quote from Revelation chapter 18, verse 4. You have to understand that the Bible is a spiritual book, and that, of course, God speaks spiritually in this regard, but you can also take it materialistic. You can also take it in the fleshly world. When he says, "Come out of her, my people," he can also refer to this world, because Jesus says that we have to separate ourselves from the world, that we are in this world, we are living in this world, we can't help it, our bodies are presently here, but we are not to be of this world. And therefore it is an imperative that you understand to come out of any organized false church in the one place, and out of the world on the other hand, and by that make yourselves available for the kingdom of God.
Right.
Now, there has been so much said in this broadcast that we could go on for hours, and we will, because we will do other recordings. But I want to close with a little video that you saw that I already put in here of Madeleine Albright. I will play these 30 seconds, and then you have an understanding of what kind of people rule you. You guys cannot hear it, but the clip is only 20 seconds long, so I will play it now for the next 20 seconds, so our listeners will see and hear what Madeleine Albright has to say about the death of 500,000 Iraqi children. With this, I close for today, and then, of course, I leave the closing words to Brett, our host.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And you know, is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
Yeah. Brett, it's to you.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Sorry, I got mixed up there a little bit, but yeah, we're really looking forward to continuing, and any way the Lord leads us. Until the next session, we'll catch up with you then. Bye-bye.
Now, as you may know, my running mate, Tim, is Catholic and went to Jesuit schools, and one of the things he and I have talked about is this idea from the Jesuits of the Magus, the more, the better.
That for the first time in human history, for the first time in all of human history, almost all of mankind is politically awake. And these new and old major powers face still yet another novel reality, in some respects unprecedented. And it is that while the lethality of their power is greater than ever, their capacity to impose control over the politically awakened masses of the world is at a historical low. I once put it rather pungently, and I was flattered that the British Foreign Secretary repeated this, as follows. Namely, in earlier times, it was easier to control 1 million people. Literally, it was easier to control 1 million people than physically to kill 1 million people. Today, it is infinitely easier to kill 1 million people than to control 1 million people. It is easier to kill than to control.
We're at the very beginning stages of a very brutal and bloody conflict. And I believe that we've come horribly off track in the years since the fall of the Soviet Union. And we're starting now in the 21st century, which I believe strongly is a crisis both of our church, a crisis of our faith, a crisis of the West, and a crisis of capitalism.
His son Jesus is here in our midst. His bride, the church, is honored to host an event affirming the dignity of the human person and the sacredness of all human life.
I think Russia is no longer a communist state, first of all. That's very important to realize. It hasn't yet defined itself, however, effectively as a democracy. It is still uncertain.
We're at the very beginning stages of a very brutal and bloody conflict, of which if the people in this room and the people in the church do not bind together and really form what I feel is an aspect of the church militant, if the people in this room and the people in the church do not bind together and really form what I feel is an aspect of the church militant, to really be able to not just stand with our beliefs, but to fight for our beliefs against this new barbarity that's starting, that we will literally eradicate everything that we've been bequeathed over the last 2,025 years.
You didn't mention the president by name, but it was hard not to conclude that that's who you were referring to. Is that fair?
I was certainly referring to the threats that we are now facing with this stated goals of this administration, which would upset the last 70 years of a new world order which was established after World War II. 70 years based on human rights, respect for the law, free trade, all of the things and aspects of this world order that took place after one of the most horrific, terrible wars in history, and I'm for maintaining it.
We are grateful to be citizens of one nation under God, who acclaim this evening that in God we trust. Bless our two candidates, our benefactors, and those whom the L. Smith Foundation has been honored to serve for 7 decades. Guide us safely home, both this evening and for all eternity, through Christ our Lord. Amen.